We stopped at Aniwetok, and we got to go fishing off Aniwetok. We didn't land at Aniwetok, we just moored the boat there for a couple of days. When we left Aniwetok in a large troop ship, we went to Saipan. We didn't land at Saipan, we were off Saipan. A good many people in my organization were transferred to an LST. We went down to Cargo Net and boarded a LCVP, Landing Craft Vehicles and Personnel, and went over to LST and went aboard the LST and went to Iwo Jima. That was, about a day's trip from Hawaii to Iwo Jima, as I remember it. Didn't take very long to get there. We were told that we were, the H hour was going to be 9 o'clock. That was when the first waves were going to hit. And my group were going to come in at 10 o'clock. The Japanese realized that they weren't going to be able to keep us from taking the island. Their philosophy was to kill so many Americans that we would agree to a negotiated peace treaty with Japan. That wasn't our idea. Our idea was to take the island. The Japanese philosophy was to wait until the beaches were crowded before they unleashed all their heavy artillery. And that's about the time I hit the beach. It was I thought the end of the world was coming. The shells and bullets were coming in and landing in the volcanic sand there, and wounded people and the dead people were all around, and I buried my face in the sand, and finally I realized that this is not the end of the war, this is just a little island. So I got a hold of myself and crawled up, and I knew that I was supposed to go over the 3 sand terraces. I got up and went and got to my position sometime during the early part of the afternoon. It was about 1,000 yards from the mountain Suribachi, where 4 or 5 days later the flag was raised. My first order was to run a telephone line from our Fire Direction Center to George Battery. George Battery had just started firing at the mountain. When I got there, they had just landed a shell, went in a cave on the top of the mountain Suribachi. The lieutenant was jumping up and down, clapping his hands because they knocked out an artillery piece. So we stayed there until the day that they raised the flag on Suribachi. We moved north, set up another headquarters north. They hit the main line of defense, which was Hill 362, and it was one of the toughest battles in the whole war. And there were a lot of casualties. Continued to be a lot of casualties day after day. There were more and more casualties. We ran lines to the forward observers and to the infantry regiments and battalions and so forth, kept communication with them. So it was a pretty simple situation. Well, some of us were wounded and a few of us were killed, and so we were very happy when the thing was over.
What kind of weapon did you have?
I had a carbine, a 30 caliber carbine.
Did you have any close calls personally when you were setting up these lines or anything?
Well, yes, I had machine gun rounds with inches of my head and the mortar and shells exploding all around me, and they just didn't hit where I was. If they'd hit a little closer, I'd have probably been blown up. There were some pretty heavy shells coming in.
How far back were you from the other batteries?
Well, when we were taking Suribachi, we were not very far, maybe a few hundred yards. Our firing batteries were about 400 yards from the foot of Suribachi. We were running lines to the firing batteries and to the forward observers there, so we were pretty close. The Japanese weren't all knocked out at once. Some of them were bypassed, some of them were, you never could tell when one of them might jump up, throw a grenade at you or shoot at you, so you had to be alert all the time. I'd been up close to the Suribachi fixing a line one night, the night after Suribachi had fallen and the flag was raised. My group, 3 people with me, started back, and we decided that we didn't know whether to walk back and maybe get shot by the Japanese or crawl in the ditch and get shot by our own people. So we decided we'd be safer just walk back. So as we started back, all of a sudden, a couple of guys jumped out of the bush and stuck a rifle in my face and said, "Give me the password." Well, I knew what the password was. We had been primed on the password that day. So I gave it to him, and he said, "Well, you'll have to do better than that." And he clicked his safety off. And I thought the guy was going to shoot me, but his buddy next to him said, "Don't shoot him. I can tell he's not a Japanese." So they didn't shoot me, but it made me mad, and I got away without being shot.
Did you ever see any of the Japanese up close?
Yeah, I saw some close.
What would you do if you saw them?
Well, if I had a chance, I'd shoot them. But there was always somebody around there that was taking care of that. I was doing my job running the lines. Most of the time, there would be somebody around. We were always alert, ready for trouble, because they would be hiding out in holes and the caves, and you couldn't tell when one of them or some of them might come out and throw grenades at you.
What were the living conditions like for you on the island?
Well, there wasn't any water. I guess I got enough water to wash my feet about the fifth or sixth day on there. It felt real good to get my feet washed, and they just had enough water to drink. There never was much water on the island. The Japanese didn't have any fresh water, so we didn't get a real good shower until we got aboard ship after the battle was over. And that was a good feeling after more than a month. And we just lived in a hole on the ground. We dug a hole, and that's where we slept and did everything except when we were out running the lines and so forth. The shells would come in, you couldn't tell. You could tell when the third one was going to hit by where it was, because they would hit, and it seemed like they would hit three at a time. They hit one, then another one, and then a line with that second shot, there was a third one that hit. So you could tell about when the third one was going to hit, but you couldn't tell when the first one or the second one was going to hit. Some of the biggest ones they had was on the second night in the island. We were on perimeter guard for our operation, and some huge shells were coming in. We were right in line for the third shell, but fortunately it hit in a hole not too far from us, and we weren't hit. Me and my buddy that were in that hole weren't hit, but some of my friends were killed that night. We knew we were suffering a lot of casualties. We knew that the Japanese, that we were going to be there until we had completely captured every cave, every Japanese there. We were just anxious to get it done. It went from one strong point to another. Each point was another group of casualties, and other people were getting killed and wounded, and until the very end, I was in part of the 28th Marine Combat Team. And the last strong point was what they called Bloody Gulch. It was a gulch running down to the ocean on the north end of Iwo Jima. And we had a bunch of our people were pulled out of the 13th Marines and put in the infantry up there, and we lost a bunch of people up there. Finally, we finished taking that, and the battle was over. We boarded ship. It was a very tough battle. I will tell you this, that Iwo Jima was the only operation that the Americans were involved in World War II where the Americans had more casualties than the enemy had. The Japanese, most of their casualties were killed, but actually we had more casualties than the Japanese had.